If we want to study realism in actual international politics, if we want to study the role of alliances, treaties and promises in international diplomacy, then we must study one person, Otto von Bismarck. Now, Bismarck was no idealist. Even he himself did not consider himself to be an idealist. Rather, he was what we call a political realist. He conducted his foreign policy with a sense of realism, with a sense of duty towards the nation. He believed in the dictum that in international relations there are no friends, no permanent enemies, only national interests. So, with the interests of his country in his mind, he conducted his diplomacy. And his diplomacy is often criticized also because it involved making contradictory promises to opposite parties. But he still conducted his diplomacy in this manner because he believed that those contradictory promises fulfilled the national interests of Germany. Now, when we talk about Bismarck, Bismarck was the chancellor of the unified German Empire. When did unified Germany come into existence? It came into existence in 1871. In fact, Bismarck's role as Chancellor of Prussia is more known to the people because it was under his leadership that Germany came into existence after Prussia fought 3 wars. Can you tell me what were those 3 wars? First was the war with Denmark in 1864, second was the war with Austria in 1866, and the third was the war with France in 1870. As a result of these 3 wars, unified German Empire was proclaimed in 1871. But Bismarck remained the Chancellor of Germany all the way from 1871 to 1890. During these 20 years, he dominated European diplomacy. He did not only decide what Germany should do, with whom Germany should make an alliance, but he also carefully manipulated other countries into making alliances that were favorable for Germany. How was he able to do that? Let's closely analyze his foreign policy. With what aims did he conduct his foreign policy? We'll refer to this map. This is the map of Europe in 1871. Now, map of Europe in history, it has frequently been changing. There was a different map of Europe at the starting of the French Revolution in 1879. There was a different map of Europe after Napoleon was defeated in 1814-15. There was a different map of Europe after the revolutions in 1848-49. There was a different map of Europe in 1871. There was a different map of Europe after the First World War. So, map of Europe keeps on changing. This is the map of Europe in 1871, where we can see the UK over here. I'm just naming the bigger parts which were relevant in European diplomacy between 1871 to 1914. So, we have the United Kingdom or Britain over here, France, the unified German Empire that was proclaimed in 1871 itself. Then here we have the Kingdom of Italy, unified Kingdom of Italy, which was proclaimed in 1861. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. Earlier it was just the Austrian Empire, then Austrian Empire had converted itself to the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1867. And here we have the Russian Empire, and here we have the Ottoman Empire. Now, Ottoman Empire ruled over a European area known as the Balkan Peninsula. This entire portion was part of the Ottoman Empire. This is the Asian part of the Ottoman Empire. This is the European part of the Ottoman Empire, and this portion geographically is known as the Balkan Peninsula. Now, the proclamation of unified German Empire in 1871 had disturbed the balance of power situation in Europe. Earlier, prior to 1871, France was the center of political gravity of Europe. The entire diplomacy of Europe was centered around France. But in the Battle of Sedan, when France was defeated by Prussia in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, a historian famously said that Europe lost a mistress, gained a master. That is, now the center of political gravity of Europe shifted from France to the German Empire. And because Bismarck knew that proclamation of unified German Empire had disturbed the balance of power situation in Europe. His first aim was to preserve this new balance of power which was created by creation of Germany. He knew that the biggest threat to the position of Germany was France, because France was offended by her defeat in the Franco-Prussian War and France wanted revenge for her defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. Bismarck also calculated that France alone is no threat to Germany. Not today, not 10 years later, not 20 years later, not 50 years later. France alone is no threat to Germany. But if France would be able to gather allies and in alliance with other powers France would attack Germany, then it might create problems for the German Empire. So, you understand his calculus, that France alone is no threat to my empire, but if France is able to get the allies, then it might be a problem for the unified German empire. So, the entire premise of Bismarck's foreign policy was that I won't allow France to have any allies. Now, in this process of getting allies, certain help was provided by external factors also. For example, one of the allies that France could get was Britain, but Britain was not interested in European politics. Now, it had got nothing to do with Bismarck, it had got nothing to do with Germany. It was Britain's own policy that we call as the policy of splendid isolation. Because of its policy of splendid isolation, Britain was least interested in the European politics that was going on at that point of time. Rather, Britain was more interested in her empire. They thought that we have got such a large colonial empire, we have got Canada, we have got Australia, we have got India, we have got South Africa, we have got New Zealand, we have got a lot of interest in Africa as well. So, what is the point of interfering in small politics, the politics of small nations here in Europe? We would rather concentrate on our colonial empire than focusing on the European politics. So, Britain was out of equation. Now, what other countries were left with which France could have an alliance? It could be Italy, it could be the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it could be the Russian Empire. Ottoman Empire was also not significant because the Tsar of Russia, the Emperor of Russia had very beautifully described Ottoman Empire in those days. He called Ottoman Empire the sick man of Europe. The sick man of Europe. Why sick man? Because it was not a power to reckon with, rather it was a declining power. At one point of time, it did control very large territory, but its power was declining during the phase that we are discussing. So, Ottoman Empire is also out of equation because that wouldn't make much difference. So, we are left with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy. Now, what Bismarck does? He tries to create an alliance of conservative aristocratic empires of Europe. He convinces the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire that all three of us, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire, all three of us are conservative aristocratic monarchies of Europe, and it would make sense if we come together in an alliance. Through that alliance, we will be able not only to protect ourselves from the outside powers, will also be able to help each other in case there is any internal revolution or rebellion. And the three emperors agreed. The resulting alliance was known as the Three Emperors League. German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire. The resulting alliance was known as the Three Emperors League, 1872 to 1878. But it lasted for a very short time, just 6 years from 1872 to 1878. What happened in 1878? Why this league could not survive? Now here we need to understand the differences between Russian Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire, particularly over the Ottoman Empire. Now, even though Ottoman Empire was not a power to reckon with, but still it controlled a lot of territories in Europe. This entire Balkan Peninsula in 1871, it was controlled by Ottoman Empire. But the revolutionary movements were going on in this region for independence from Ottoman Empire. Now, as far as these independence movements were concerned, as far as these nationalist movements in Balkan Peninsula are concerned, both Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russian Empire had divergent attitudes towards these nationalist movements. In what way? Now, Russian Empire wanted to support these nationalist movements in Balkan Peninsula in Ottoman Empire so that its influence could expand to Balkan Peninsula. Russian Empire wanted to expand her influence into the Balkan Peninsula because it wanted access to the Mediterranean Sea. For that purpose, if Ottoman Empire is to disintegrate, Russian Empire would favor that outcome. On the other hand, Austro-Hungarian Empire was not at all in favor of the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. The problem that Austro-Hungarian Empire was facing, that the same nationalities that lived in the Balkan Peninsula under Ottoman Empire, they also lived within the Austro-Hungarian Empire. If the nationalities in Balkan Peninsula will get independence, then those nationalities in Austro-Hungarian Empire, they will also start asking for independence. So, Austro-Hungarian Empire did not want those nationalities to get independence. It wanted the Ottoman Empire to maintain its control in the Balkan Peninsula. So, the empire was that of the Ottomans, but two powers had divergent interests in the Balkan Peninsula. Austro-Hungarian Empire wanted to maintain the Ottoman Empire. On the other hand, Russian Empire wanted the Ottoman Empire to disintegrate, at least in the Balkan Peninsula. Austro-Hungarian Empire wanted to prevent the expansion of Russian influence into the Balkan Peninsula. Russian Empire wanted to expand its influence into the Balkan Peninsula. So, the two powers had divergent interests in the Balkan Peninsula. That is one thing that you must remember if you want to understand the geopolitics of this time. Now, Bismarck also knew that Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russian Empire, they had divergent interests, and there was a possibility that the two powers may come in clash with each other over the Eastern question. This problem was known as the Eastern question. In order to prevent any war, and rather in order to divert the attention of both these empires from this question, he started focusing on the imperial questions, that we are conservative monarchies, we are aristocratic monarchies, you let go of other matters, let's focus on what's going on in our monarchies. So, he convinced the three emperors to bind themselves in the form of an alliance. However, that question was too significant to be ignored. In fact, in 1877, there was a war between Russian Empire and Ottoman Empire over Balkan Peninsula. In that war, Russian Empire defeated Ottoman Empire, and it incorporated some of the territories of Ottoman Empire into its own empire. Now, this thing was not liked by Austria-Hungary. It convinced Bismarck that Russia should not be allowed to gain territories in Balkan Peninsula. An international conference was called in Berlin in 1878, the Congress of Berlin. Now, in this Congress of Berlin, Bismarck decided to support the claim of Austria-Hungary against the claim of Russia. All three were members of an international alliance. All three were members of the Three Emperors League. But Bismarck, when asked to choose sides, he decided to choose the side of Austro-Hungarian Empire against Russian Empire. Russian Empire obviously was offended that how can you take the side of one against the other? At least you can maintain neutrality. We'll sort out our matters ourselves. If you can't maintain neutrality, if we are going to choose one over the other, then what is the point of binding all three of us in a single alliance? Then let this alliance be broken. So Russia withdrew itself from the Three Emperors League in 1878. The result was the dual alliance in 1879. Russia had withdrawn itself. The only two powers were left, that is the German Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now these two powers had a dual alliance with each other in 1879. Now in this dual alliance, Italy was also added in 1882 and the dual alliance became triple alliance in 1882. And that was also a very interesting story. Now let's have a look at the map. This is France, this is Germany, this is Italy. What was the primary concern of Bismarck? That France should not get any allies. Italy over here, there was a possibility that France could get allied with Italy. Italy could become an ally of France. Bismarck did not want that situation. So Bismarck secretly encouraged Italy to have its empire in Tunisia in Africa. Now over here, like it's not visible in this image, across the Mediterranean Sea in Africa, there is this country of Tunisia. It was not a colony at that point of time, but just next to Tunisia is the colony of Algeria. Algeria was the colony of France. Bismarck encouraged Italy to have its own colony in Tunisia. At the same time, secretly, he encouraged France to have its colony expanded from Algeria into Tunisia. So two powers at the same time were encouraged to expand into Tunisia. Do you think it's the right thing to do? Bismarck thought that's the thing that is going to protect the interests of Germany, so he did that. At the same time, he encouraged two powers, France and Italy, to expand into Tunisia. Bismarck knew that France is the bigger power. Eventually, if the two powers would compete, if France is to compete with Italy, if Italy is to compete with France over expansion into a small African territory, eventually France will succeed and Italy will form a grudge against France. In that situation, Bismarck jumped in and gave solace to Italy. It's okay, sometimes things happen in international diplomacy. France was able to bulldoze your ambitions because you were alone. Why don't you join our dual alliance? Had you been part of our alliance, France would not have been powerful enough to dictate its terms to you. So in this way, Italy was encouraged to join the dual alliance, and the dual alliance became triple alliance in 1882. Another interesting thing happened, that there was a revival of Three Emperors League in 1881. Why so? We had discussed in detail that the Three Emperors League had broken down in 1878. Then how come this league was revived in 1881? So something dramatic happened in Russia. The older Russian emperor, Tsar Alexander II, who had done the Three Emperors League earlier and who had withdrawn himself from the Three Emperors League earlier in 1878. He was assassinated by Russian revolutionaries in 1881. He was assassinated by Russian nihilists, anarchists in 1881. And the new emperor, Tsar Alexander III, he wanted some international anchor so that he could get support in case any internal crisis arises in Russia. So he approached Bismarck that is there any possibility that we can revive that Three Emperors League as we had done earlier. So Bismarck was more than happy to receive this proposal, and immediately in 1881 there was revival of Three Emperors League, but this again continued only till 1887. Why? Because the original question still remained the same. What to do with Ottoman Empire? What to do with the Balkan territories of Ottoman Empire? While Austro-Hungarian Empire wanted Ottoman Empire to maintain its hold over Balkan Peninsula, Russian Empire wanted to expand her influence into the Balkan Peninsula. And in 1885, another crisis erupted in this region, the Bulgarian crisis. Now again, there was a international situation in which Russian Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire, they were on the opposite sides. Again, Bismarck was put in a tough spot where he could not support both. He had to exercise a choice. He could either support Austro-Hungarian Empire or he could support the Russian Empire. Again, he chose to support the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Again, Russian Empire was offended. Now, Tsar Alexander III also came at the same conclusion that Tsar Alexander II had come to, that there is no point joining an alliance where Bismarck is always going to support the claims of Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russian Empire is always going to be a third wheel. So, he withdrew from the Three Emperors League again. So, the revival of Three Emperors League had the same fate as the original Three Emperors League. Both, at both times, the league broke down on account of the Eastern question. The divergent opinions of Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire over the Balkan territories of the Ottoman Empire, and the decision of German Empire to support Austro-Hungarian claims both the times. But what happened next was simply remarkable. You won't believe. After the two experiences with Germany, Russian Empire was again approached by Bismarck. Why is Bismarck doing that over and over again? Because if he would not have Russian Empire bound in an alliance with Germany, then there is a possibility that France may become friends with Russia. That was the most dreadful situation according to Bismarck, because in that situation, German Empire would be surrounded by enemies on both the fronts. France was already enemy of the German Empire on its western borders. Then if France would be friends with Germany, then Germany would have an enemy on the eastern frontier as well. He did not want that situation. He did not want that two-front war scenario. So he was more than eager to have Russia included in an alliance with Germany. So what happened in 1887? Bismarck proposed to the Russian Tsar Alexander III that okay, things did not go well the last time, things did not go well with your father, but now I am here proposing a new treaty. Now this is a secret treaty, you don't share the terms of this treaty with anyone else, but I promise you that in future if any crisis erupts over the Balkan Peninsula, I am gonna support your claim. Already under dual alliance, already under the terms of dual alliance, he has made this promise to Austro-Hungarian Empire that in case any crisis erupts over the Eastern question, in case you are attacked by Russia over Eastern question, I will militarily support the claims of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now here in the reinsurance treaty, he is making a contradictory promise to Russia. In case any military crisis happens over the Eastern question, in case Austria-Hungary attacks Russia, I am making a promise that I will support the claims of Russia. I will militarily support Russia against Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now you tell me, is it possible to satisfy both the claims simultaneously? Of course not. Bismarck knew that. And Russia was super suspicious. Tsar Alexander III was super suspicious of Bismarck's claims. And Bismarck could sense the discomfort in Tsar Alexander III. So he said that let's not have a permanent treaty. Let's just do a trial. Let's have this treaty only for 3 years. If you would find our support to be promising, then we can continue this alliance, we can renew this alliance later. But if you think that, if you would think that our support is not forthcoming, then you can terminate that alliance. Let's have a trial for 3 years. So this reinsurance treaty was done only for 3 years, and it could be renewed after that. So that was the high point of Bismarck's realistic politics, Bismarck's real politics. Now, before that could happen, before a reinsurance treaty could be renewed, there was a change in German politics. German Emperor Kaiser William I had died, and he was replaced by Kaiser William II. Now, Kaiser William II was a young emperor. He did not like the style of German politics. German international diplomacy was dominated by Bismarck. He asked Bismarck what kind of politics we are doing. Like, why are we not straightforward in our foreign policy? Why can't we make an open declaration that we'll be friends with one and let the other power do whatever it wants to do? Bismarck tries to explain. No, Your Majesty, if we'll do that, it will harm Germany's interests. Other powers may form an alliance against Germany, and then Germany would be in a very difficult situation. So that is the only reason I am conducting this underhand politics, is this underhand diplomacy. That is why I am making these contradictory promises. But Kaiser William II, being Kaiser William II, the young emperor, he did not like this style of politics, and he forced Bismarck to resign in 1890. So Bismarck had a very unceremonious exit from the German politics. He lived to see his entire diplomacy brought to ground. But that is the topic we'll discuss in any of our subsequent videos. So in this video, we tried to see how Bismarck conducted his foreign policy keeping the interests of Germany in mind. He did not pay attention to morality in politics. He did not pay attention to what promise he had made to one power, what promise he had made to the other power. If something was for the German national interest, he tried to do that. So that is one way in which international politics is conducted. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, that's for you to take the call. But we must know that there is this aspect in international diplomacy that we call realism, realistic politics, real politics. So Bismarck is an outstanding example of that, outstanding example of, practical example of realism in politics. So that is all as far as this video is concerned. I'll see you in the next videos.